Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending another DABCC Live webinar. I'm extremely excited about this one. We have PhD Virtual back on the line and James West with us back on the line, and to chat all about this great disaster recovery for virtualized environments, and definitely a hot topic, one that is always hot because it's one of the most important things you have is what happens when we have disaster and how to recover from it. So that's what we're going to chat about today and present to you along with a demo. And so with no further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest for today, James West. James, can you just real quick before we get started, just tell everyone who you are and what do you do over at PhD Virtual?
Right. So again, my name is James West. I'm the SC manager here at PhD Virtual. I'm responsible for managing the SC team on the pre-sale side. On any given day, I'm doing webinars with awesome people like Doug here. I'm supporting primarily our customers that are looking at our software from a evaluation standpoint or more just like basic questions. Also, we do, I get my son involved with some of our existing customers to provide solutions given our product base and what we support. So I get involved in quite different things, whether it's competitive research, looking for ways to improve the existing product lines, to expand, and really to listen to our customers and figure out how we can provide the products that match the needs and requirements of the customer base when it comes to data protection.
Absolutely, absolutely. That sounds great. So let's get going. Let's jump into this. Sound good?
Good to me. So.
Hey, I'm sorry, James. I must confess, I think, well, I did talk about this, but I don't know if I talked about it once we started. So, guys, please, just one more reminder: don't forget to use the questions piece to GoToWebinar, and as we go through this, feel free to ask James and myself any question you have. And as we're presenting, I will actually manage these questions and ask them within relevant time. That we won't wait until the very end. So don't forget that. It's probably the most important piece other than sit back and enjoy the show. So with no further ado, James, it's all yours.
Thanks, Doug. So again, just to quickly highlight why we're all here today and what we're going to be discussing. At the highest level, we're discussing disaster recovery for the virtual environments, right? Now, one of the things, and from my own personal experience, disaster recovery really hasn't gotten the attention that it necessarily requires. And what we want to do today is educate all of you on some of the things you want to consider for the virtual environment and how to accomplish disaster recovery. And more specifically, we're going to discuss the difference between doing DR from an on-premise or local standpoint, and then also being able to leverage the cloud for disaster recovery. Along the way, again, we do welcome questions or comments to throw in based upon what we're discussing at that point in time. At the tail end here, I'll give you a quick demo of the PhD Virtual products and how we're able to provide disaster recovery for the virtual environment, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up with any questions you might have based upon what we discussed. So starting out with, very basically, what types of disasters lead to IT downtime in the infrastructure? And quite surprisingly, the majority of downtimes are man-made produced, and not so much natural disaster. And really what happens is when people are doing disaster recovery planning, they immediately think, oh, how do we protect against a hurricane or a tornado or anything of that nature, right? And for the most part, that's not typically what brings down IT systems. These are man-made, which on the next slide kind of breaks down some of these disasters and these IT downtimes and what actually leads to these. You'll see there the majority is produced by human error. Someone may be deleting a piece of data or applying the incorrect software patch or things of that nature. But the biggest thing is, it's not a matter of accounting for, natural disaster. It's produced due to human error. And I know from my standpoint, it's, having been a sysadmin before, wherever you're upgrading a system or you're applying updates, you really kind of cross your fingers hoping everything comes back online, especially if you don't have disaster recovery. Because, if, given the criticality of that system, the ability to bring that system online, if it does not come up correctly, is, for me, it was very stressful at times.
Extremely.
But that's your job at the end of the day. If you bring down a system that's critical to the business and it's because of something you did, at the end of the day, it might cost you your job. So it's always something you want to account for. And disaster recovery, I think is really starting to become part of the conversation when you look at being at the executive level. Given that a business today, most businesses can't function without IT systems, the need to protect those IT systems, the importance of that has definitely gone up. And we're going to discuss in more detail how we can accomplish disaster recovery for the virtual environment and the benefits of going with one route or the other.
Yeah, and I would definitely add in there, the complexity of an environment today and all the different moving parts we have within our data centers. It's maybe it's not even human error, but it's just a piece, like you mentioned, you're doing an update, right? And one update conflicts with one of this system you have that you don't use very often. And so there's a lot of different things that can really cause a huge issue that might seem like a simple little process. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's a good point, because, a lot of environments today are trying to do more with less. I was speaking with a customer earlier this week. He supported about 150 users, and he was a one-man IT shop. And the fact, given that your plate is that full, you can't account for everything. It just simply isn't realistic. It's not possible. And, the important thing is you want to be able to recover if something does come down. That's the biggest goal.
Absolutely.
Right. And, I felt pretty bad for this guy. He was, pretty frustrated given everything he was under. And I kind of, gave him an hour or so to kind of get away from all that and just kind of chit chat and discuss just, birds and bees or whatever. But, one of the things with virtualization is, in general, it not only does it make you more flexible as an IT department or infrastructure, but it also will simplify disaster recovery. And it all starts with, when you virtualize, you're transforming your systems now from hardware to a collection of files. And files can go anywhere. And when you look at virtual machines, whether it's VMware or Citrix, that's all they are now. So, files can go to a USB drive, they can go to tape, they can go to the cloud, they can go anywhere. So it makes your systems very portable. That naturally is going to simplify how you can protect those systems in case of a disaster. Right? So really where it starts with all this is virtualization, which leads to how we can simplify and provide a robust and flexible disaster recovery strategy. Now, when you look at disaster recovery, there's really a big decision that needs to be made. Do you have the ability to support a secondary data center? That being on premise. And knowing that the costs that go into that, having to rent out the space, whether you're renting it from a second provider or you're actually owning the entire space yourself. Then there's the infrastructure components to it. So now you got to account for the energy costs, the cooling, the server hardware, storage hardware, etc. And all those things add up to be a substantial cost to the business. And the other side of the spectrum is cloud. Now, obviously, cloud is still kind of in the early adoption phases of the world. However, it does make disaster recovery a lot more simplified, which can reduce those upfront costs if you're actually having to host a data center yourself for disaster recovery, or whether you're running it through a third-party provider. What we're going to discuss here in the next couple of slides is exactly what needs to be considered. If you do on-premise disaster recovery, if you do the cloud, the positives, the challenge to those, and just give you an idea of when you're looking at disaster recovery and you're planning this out, what you want to account for given your strategy and your needs when it comes to DR. And let's look quickly at the benefits and challenges to hosting your own DR site. Now, obviously, the biggest thing and the most upfront that comes out is, you own the data. One of the things that people are always hesitant about with the cloud is the fact that now I don't physically know where my data exists anymore. And some people are a little hesitant to kind of give up that ownership or responsibility of the data. They prefer to have it in-house. They physically know where the data always is going to be. And you always have access to all your systems. Now, with that, naturally does reduce the security concerns because you physically know where the data is. When it's out in the cloud, you now are handing over responsibility of the data to that cloud provider. So there's a lot of trust being handed over from yourself over to the provider you go with. Now, some of the challenges, obviously, we mentioned before, is the upfront cost from an infrastructure standpoint to host an on-premise DR location. And the biggest thing is the maintenance of that. And one of those is configuration sprawl. So a lot of businesses today don't run very frequent DR tests, maybe once a year. Some who are a little bigger can afford to do this every quarterly or every quarter, for example. I used to work for a pretty large global international firm that would test DR every quarter. Nowhere else that I've been before that did we actually do DR testing. So it's not uncommon to come across customers who just aren't able to provide the resources, the time, or money to do proper DR testing. And with that, with configuration sprawl, is there's constant changes to the infrastructure, right? And what you want to be able to identify is, do those changes carry over to affecting our disaster recovery plan or strategy? So if I upgrade a system or if I add a system to the production side, how does that affect my DR plan? Do I need to change my disaster recovery testing? Does it change the workflow, right? There's all these things that need to be considered, because if you're only running DR testing, let's say once a year, that really kind of has you blind up until that DR test, because you may not know how those changes on the production side have affected your DR testing now. And so all those things want to be considered when you're looking at hosting DR from a local or on-premise standpoint. Now, when you look at cloud specifically, right, there's different models on how you can use cloud. So a lot of times what happens is cloud providers might try and sell you, everything under the sun. And, that's not always, for me, I always like to tell my customers, let's do baby steps first. I don't want to have you go back up the entire environment. Let's make sure a small set is stable, it works, and then let's gradually grow out the deployment. Now, with cloud models, right, there's public, there's private, and there's hybrid. So starting at the top with public, very basic. You've heard of some of these, Amazon, Google, Rackspace. So with public, that data is housed and maintained by the cloud provider solely. So you're handing over responsibility to that cloud provider to ensure the availability of your data to the business or your end users. Now, private, is a situation where you're still hosting the data on premise, but you're presenting out resources in a cloud fashion. For example, if you're a university, and universities have multiple departments, multiple colleges, what you can do is centralize all of your IT resources and then present those out to all of the various departments or colleges. So it's still a cloud model. The only difference is that nowadays it's physically still owned by the business. And then lastly is the hybrid model. Hybrid employs a combination of public and private type cloud models. And what I think with this is it's service centric. And what I mean by that is, what you want to look at is what services are available to the business or the organization. And then from there, identify which ones may be better for the cloud, and then which ones might be better to remain in-house. So this kind of comes back to that baby steps point, where if you want to leverage cloud or are kind of hesitant to get your feet wet with it, maybe it's best to start with some of your less critical systems, get them out in the cloud to relieve your IT resources, your admins, from having to manage them from an on-premise standpoint. And then what you're able to do is identify with those systems, is it possible for us to move more out there? Or do we comfortable with this approach by doing a hybrid model and still keeping some of those systems in-house and then pushing some of the less critical ones out into the cloud? And that's being service-centric, identifying those services which are a better fit for one over the other. Now, to speak to the benefits and challenges to the cloud. So the cloud, in general, just makes you a lot more flexible from an IT standpoint. The biggest thing is that it relieves the headache of having to manage hardware anymore. I don't have to manage a data center. I don't have to worry about cooling, energy costs, the server hardware, etc. So I simply can grow as I need to with cloud providers, or I can, restrict my resources as I need it, given the usage of the business. And so it makes you a lot more flexible. The fact that, if I need more resources, I just simply request more resources from the cloud provider and they give it to me, I'm good to go. So like I said, flexibility is the biggest thing with the cloud. Again, there are some challenges with going with the cloud. One of those is do you have the internet bandwidth to support accessing systems now over the internet? And I'll discuss this in more detail with one of our products, and the best use cases, but you need to consider that now traffic is now being driven out through the internet now, and most of it's not going to be housed in-house within the internal LAN. The other thing is how do you maintain security for some systems that data needs to be protected at a higher level? Do the cloud providers have policies in place that allow you to meet regulatory guidelines that data must be protected in a certain manner? And then you look at disaster recovery. Is if you do DR in the cloud, how do you fail over the business into that infrastructure? So how do you redirect end users from wherever their office locations are at into the cloud now? How do you get them access to their services at this point, now that you lost the entire data center? So all those things you want to consider when looking at cloud and leveraging that as a disaster recovery site. Again, whether you're doing on-premise or cloud disaster recovery, it won't change across those. Really what you want to focus on is starting at the top. Is when you're putting together a DR plan, is identifying obviously what services need to be protected, and then how will you recover those systems in the disaster recovery scenario. What roles will be assigned to what engineers and in what order. Obviously, you probably want the network team to start first, ensuring there's network connectivity across the systems. And then you might have in parallel the server team working on recovering all of the operating systems, virtual machines, etc. And then you might have an applications group, which is verifying now the services if they're coming online and they're available. So you want to make sure, one, you have a clearly defined plan, who's doing what in what order, and obviously ensuring that plan is able to meet the SLAs that have been put in place. Within that, you also want to be able to identify, is there anything out there software-wise or hardware-wise that's going to allow us to make that plan a little more streamlined, or even allow us to reduce the work required to bring up in case of a disaster? Software companies such as ourselves are constantly coming out with ways to improve processes, workflows when it comes to data protection. And then, of course, obviously, you want to identify the money aspect. How much money can be thrown into accomplishing this plan that you're looking to put in place, which leads to the last point, is having buy-in from the executive level. Being that IT systems are so critical to the business, it really needs to be an organizational decision to identify what the plan is, because you don't want to go from an IT standpoint, go on it with your own strategy, and then come back and the executives are like, well, no, that's not what I had in mind. So you want to start from the top down and really make it a decision that everyone agrees with, and then move forward from there. So real quick, I'm going to turn it over to Doug. We just have two survey questions. Just to get an idea from our attendees today around disaster recovery and leveraging the cloud.
Well,
starting with,
No, please go ahead.
So starting with, has your company implemented a cloud DR solution? So if you want to take a couple seconds here and just input your votes here, and then we'll have Doug go ahead and reflect out the responses from the attendees.
Just well, it looks like everyone's done now. Go ahead and close this poll. And we had 89% say no, they have not, and 11% said yes. Very interesting result. And we have a second poll for you. Go ahead and launch that. Are we ready for the second one also?
Yep, go ahead, Doug.
Perfect. So, will your company implement a cloud DR solution within the next 2 years? I hope so. I love watching these numbers. It looks like the stock exchange. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, looks like it settled down. So, close the poll. And this one's sort of interesting too. 10% already is implemented. 21% says yes, they will do it within the next 2 years. 12% said no. That's an interesting one there. I'd love to know why. So if anyone wants to use the question piece and tell me why you have no desire to do this. And then 57% of the people said not sure.
So it's pretty interesting. I mean, one, it is cloud DR. Like I said, cloud in general is in its early adoption phase. But, I think you'll definitely see the benefits of cloud promote people to kind of make that leap. And obviously, cloud providers themselves are going to be enhancing their platforms and offerings to businesses to make it a lot more attractive. And then, the biggest thing is cost-wise. As more people jump over into the cloud space, you'll definitely see cloud providers to be, a lot more competitive, as their prices will obviously reduce down from where they are today.
Oh wow, this is interesting. One of the gentlemen out there listening said that the state law currently prohibits them from doing a cloud backup. That makes some sense. There's probably some, not just government regulations, but maybe industry regulations or something affecting their ability to move to the cloud. Interesting.
Right. And I think thanks for sharing that. I mean, that's one of the things I haven't pointed out is, maybe from an IT standpoint, you're looking to make some changes, but given certain policies or mandated guidelines, you just can't do that. So that's always something that's important to recognize when you look at things that are inhibiting people from leveraging the cloud. Thanks for sharing that. Now, just kind of to piggyback on that poll, Gartner ran a little bit of a research into the state of cloud DR and where that's going in, over the next year or so. And you'll see that the percent here of mid-sized companies looking to leverage cloud DR is going to be around 30%. Now, it's a little higher than our polling, which I believe was around 25%. But it definitely goes to show that the adoption rate of using cloud as disaster recovery is definitely going to spike up here in the next couple of years. And like I said, cloud providers today will continue to enhance what they're offering to customers on how they maintain SLAs to be able to make it a lot more attractive to jump over into that space. And like I said, you always want to do baby steps. So even if you're not sure today, why not try one service or a system? Just try it out and see if there's really the benefits that come with that, if it's worth looking at more of a global perspective and moving more systems over to the cloud.
James, here's an interesting comment. Someone said here, for cloud, you need a very high amount of, or a high-speed connection. We have 100 users. And last time we did a webinar, you actually addressed that. You talked about how you could manage bandwidth and throttle bandwidth. Can you maybe say a quick bit about that? That does not have to be the case that you need a lot of bandwidth to back up to the cloud, does it?
So there's always a number of variables that go into it, and really what you want to look at is you want a platform to be efficient at how it pushes data across. And one of that is, deduplication is a big part of that. You don't want to. You can still be a large environment, but what you don't want to do is pushing over duplicate data across your internet link. Is there any traffic in that data that can be removed and deduplicated? Can it be compressed? There's obviously, WAN optimizers today that allow you to efficiently move data from your location out to the internet. So there's definitely ways in which to do this, but it is one of those things you want to consider. And the other side of it is, do you have any way of doing like a QoS? So do you have any way of providing priority over certain types of traffic outside the internet? So it is something to consider, but there are solutions out there today that allow you to minimize the impact of having a smaller pipe when it comes to your internet link.
Interesting. Here's somebody asked a question. What about huge seeding times for big environments?
Right.
Really the same lines with what you just discussed. Please go ahead.
Right. Yeah. And cloud's it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. That's why in some situations using a hybrid model might be the best approach. If you have massive amounts of data, maybe it's best to keep that on site. But there are ways that cloud providers, I know Amazon, for example, provides a way to actually provide a link between your data center and theirs, and it provides a completely divided environment from the rest of the customers they support. And you can create a dedicated channel to and from their data center and yours. But like I said, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution for the cloud. There may be situations where it might not be the best fit. It's not something where you want to force it upon yourself to use. There's no problem in coming to a point where, this probably isn't the best idea. Let's look at other ways we can do this, right? And that might be the case for this situation, or may not. But there's no problem walking away with using the cloud for certain situations.
You bet.
And here's an interesting breakdown from CRN back in September of last year. It breaks down DR stats at the level of each country. Quite surprising when I saw this, the U.S. wasn't even above the global average, and Australia seems to be leading all countries when it comes to having a DR facility or ensuring the recoverability of your systems within 24 hours. Well, I thought this was pretty interesting.
It is.
To see, country by country. So if there's anyone out there from Australia, you guys are definitely ahead of the curve here with disaster recovery and ensuring uptime of your systems.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I'm trying to think of some of the the laws that might you take someone like Germany that's a very conservative country, and then Australia. I don't really see them that way, but that's very interesting. Although they are ahead in time, my friends always tell me, tomorrow is really nice outside. Thank you for letting me know that. Well, maybe that's the case.
It's just some interesting stats for some of you just to take away and see what everyone else is doing out there across the entire world. And just another quick stat here. When you look at data protection on the virtual machine side, only 37% actually back up the virtual machines.
Wow.
Now, again, what you can take away from this is, which of that 30%, how much is production, how much is not production or dev. But 37% is a pretty low number.
That's actually sort of scary.
Right. Yeah.
Could they be doing something other than backing up? I mean, is there another solution? Are they seeing maybe vMotion as a backup solution, which it's not? But
right.
That's that number right there really surprises me. I believe it though, but it really surprises me.
Yeah, I get some customers who are either just virtualized or maybe have been virtualized for a year or so, and they tell us they haven't been backing up, and I'm just I fear for them because what are you going to do if you're losing this? They don't have an answer to it. And some say I'll rebuild everything. It's like,
yeah, your domain controller.
Are you sure that you could rebuild everything? Yeah. Right. I mean, the day is gone. The day is gone. You're not rebuilding anything at that point. I mean, so.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty surprising, but just kind of goes to show that there's a lot of vulnerability that is being placed on businesses by not protecting the entire infrastructure. And when you virtualize, it makes backing up a whole lot easier. So, something I'm always pushing on people because I've been there and you know, can barely go to sleep at night praying this stuff doesn't crash because I don't know if I can recover it or not, but it's pretty interesting. And
yeah, here's somebody that said they use snapshots are taken for their backup. I think we addressed that one last time too. The snapshots work great, but if you lose the server, you lose the snap, right?
Right. And I was going to mention that, but I'm glad someone else threw it in there. You know, snapshots are not a backup solution. You know, they're good to use, kind of like a rollback point. You know, if you want to snapshot a VM, if you're doing an upgrade, you can always revert it back if it blows up. But the biggest thing is around recovery. And to your point, then also, if you lose the storage, you lose everything because all the snapshots are linked together.
Yep.
You know, you lose the flexibility around recovering, you know, just a virtual machine, just a virtual disk, or just a file in that instance. So you know, snapshots, it's a good way to protect against certain things, but it's not a backup solution. Right?
It's definitely a nice technology.
For snapshot. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I do get that a number of times from customers. You know, I do snapshots. Why do I need your solution? And I kind of got to explain, you know, those points what you're losing out on. It's really the recovery aspect of what you're missing out on. And real quick, this is just a hit list of, you know, of businesses that have succumbed to IT downtimes and the impact it's had on those businesses. I'm sure some of you might have heard of these that have happened, but it kind of goes back to that point I said, you know, business just can't function today without IT. You know, these two, they go hand in hand. Without IT, the business is not going to function. And if it is functioning, it's not going to function anywhere to the near, you know, operational status that it was before. This actually leads me to a personal story. Before I came to PhD Virtual, I was a systems admin myself. I'd worked for a pretty well-known hospital that was a level 1 trauma center. And I was responsible for, we were doing a maintenance on our UP system, or UPS system. And, you know, I was still pretty new to the server group. So, you know, APC was coming on board to manage their UPS systems. And, you know, before that, they came on board, you know, I asked them, is there anything that I need to be aware of that's going to, you know, lead to a downtime or any type of, you know, outside requirement that this needs to happen outside business hours? They said no. So I scheduled the maintenance. It was about 9 a.m. in the morning. They're on site running through everything. And what happened was, which, you know, I wasn't really that up to date on electricity and how everything worked, but they were putting us into bypass power. So we were coming in straight from the street at that point. And I, you know, at the time, I didn't really think anything of it. And then about, I don't know, 20 minutes or so later, I look over to the one rack of servers and there's no lights on. When one of the most eerie things I ever saw, you know, my heart dropped, and, you know, all of our servers in one rack were just completely off. So we're running around trying to figure out what happened, and realized that the breaker for that row of servers had tripped. So we turn it back on, get the servers back online, and then about 20 minutes later, everything was back off again. So we were quick to realize that we're maxing out the breaker. So we're really running around between each rack, redirecting power lines to redistribute the power. So we get everything back online, and now we're working on recovering all of our systems. So, you know, fast forward, it came online in about 2 hours. We got everything back up and working. But during that 2 hours, the entire hospital could not operate. There was no computers, there was no phones. It got to a point where the hospital was redirecting patients to other hospitals. But kind of shorten this up, what happened was the hospital ended up losing a little over $1 million in hospital fees in just that 2 hour time frame. So, you know, really why I mentioned that is kind of go to show that the financial impact of disasters, and that was just for 2 hours. You know, imagine that for, you know, a day or so. And that was just one hospital. If you're, you know, a Fortune 500 company, you know, they're losing, it could be millions in a matter of minutes, right? So it's always something I like sharing, just to kind of hit home, you know, the impact of disasters and IT outages if they're not planned for, and you don't have those proper procedures in place to recover from those outages. So with that, I want to dive into PhD's approach to disaster recovery and what we have solution-wise to offer to our customers to help with implementing a foolproof disaster recovery strategy and plan. So today we have two products that are focused around data protection or disaster recovery. We have PhD Virtual Backup and Replication, and then we also have Reliable DR. On the backup side of things, we introduced in our 6.2 version over a month or so ago what we call CloudHook. CloudHook is extending our capabilities to now back up to cloud providers directly with our software. And you'll see here on this slide, that list is Google Cloud Storage, it's Amazon S3, Rackspace Cloud Files, and any provider who might be using OpenStack Swift. We can actually send our data from the local data center directly to these providers in the deduplicated and compressed format of our backups. This gives you added redundancy to your backups. If you lose the entire data center or if you lose the storage housing your backups, you have that data protected off-site in the cloud. Then will allow you to recover your systems fully. And this comes back to the fact that once you virtualize, it makes things a lot easier. The CloudHook functionality with PhD allows you to extend the capabilities beyond just the on-premise housing of backups. And then the Reliable DR product is focused around disaster recovery assurance. And when I say assurance, it's allowing you to verify services that are made available to the business. When I say a service could be, you'll see here, it could be Exchange, it could be SharePoint, it could be a CRM, it could be an ERP solution. And at the end of the day, that's what your end users are interacting with. And that, from an IT standpoint, is what you need to ensure is available to the business. And what Reliable DR does is it's an orchestration software that allows you to validate your disaster recovery plans and tests. And from an orchestration standpoint, what it allows you to do is identify what your set RTOs are, what your set RPOs are, and then it'll report on all those tests to verify that you're now in compliance given what you set within the software. And then all of these tests that you invoke through the software are service-centric. So if you want to identify if certain services are running for Active Directory or Exchange, you can validate that. If you want to verify a web application, if the web page is available and online, you can verify that as well. And then what it does, after all those tests are successful, it'll certify those as a CRP, as we call it. That CRP is a known good state that you can fail over to in the case of a disaster. And you can automate all of this, so it removes the hand-holding or the constant maintenance of disaster recovery to the point now where you can do this once a day if you want to. So if you're not doing disaster recovery at all, or maybe you're doing it once a year, going from that to once a day is a pretty big shift in your disaster recovery strategy. That's what Reliable DR gives you. DR assurance, it removes that guessing game if a disaster occurs. One is how you recover, and two, the biggest question is, can you recover? It removes that guessing game from that.
Hey,
what I'm going to do here is just take a quick couple, 5 or 10 minutes or so, and just quickly show you these two products and what they actually look like in the environment.
Perfect. James, I have a couple comments, questions from the audience here I want to throw at you before we move to the demo. One of the statements is replication to cloud update from 1 hour between the cloud and the in-house?
Right. So, good question. You're allowed to dictate yourself how often you want to do that. So in the software, you can specify if you want replication to happen once a day, or do I want it to happen 3 times a day? That's completely up to you as a customer, depending upon your policies. In our software, you can dictate at which interval that'll happen.
Sounds good.
Any other questions, Doug?
That's it. A lot of comments.
So here I am in
oh, I'm sorry.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it is good stuff.
So real quick, I'm gonna show you the backup product, and then I'll conclude here with the reliable DR. So here we are in our VMware environment, running 5.0 in a 2-host cluster. On the virtual backup and replication, what we use is virtual appliances, which makes things a whole lot easier when you look at virtualizing. Why not use a virtual appliance? Just makes sense. You'll see here PCVBA v1, v2, v3, and VDR. These are actual instances of our appliance. These are the data movers for backups, restores, and replication for the software. Now, on top of that, we allow you to manage our software through a plugin within the vSphere client itself. So you can right-click any VM, any host, and then you'll see PHP Virtual listed here for you. And what I'll do is go in the console here, which is already open. And this is where you manage everything in regards to the backup side of things. Now, when you look at CloudHook, very simply, though, what we've added to our interface here is the ability to specify a cloud provider as the backup target. And one of our appliances here is actually mapped to our Rackspace account. So very simply, you would just input your username, the API key, which will be provided by Rackspace, and then everything here, it will be dictated by you as an end user. So pick your storage path, which is like a bucket or container, prefix, and then lastly, which is very important, is invoking your encryption passphrase. So one of those things going to the cloud is always a concern is security. You can't use our software without specifying the encryption passphrase. We don't allow you to back up to the cloud without doing this. So this provides in transit and at rest encryption. That data remains secure while it gets to the cloud and then while it sits in the cloud as well. And only you can recover that data, the fact that you know the encryption passphrase. And really what you want to get from this is this provides, again, redundancy of your backup data. So we have 3 other appliances doing local backups, and then we have the one appliance going to the cloud for us. Again, if I lose my primary data center or if I lose my backup storage, I have that data somewhere else. It's nice for getting away from tape. I know personally I couldn't stand using tape. It's just a headache to manage and operate. So it's a nice option if you're trying to get away from tape to protect yourself off-site. Again, too, it's also a nice option if you don't have a DR site because it's just too expensive. You can leverage your cloud to dump the backup data too. So that's CloudHook and extending the ability to go beyond just local backups. Moving forward to reliable DR.
Hey, James, real quick before we move forward, I do have a question from the crowd, the audience, our listeners. Does the PhD console only work with a local install client, or does it work with the vSphere web client also?
So today it's with the desktop version of the vSphere client. You can run it as a standalone version. We don't have integration with the VMware web client today, but it is something we will support down the road. We obviously realize VMware is moving away from the desktop client and will be strictly web-based. So we, of course, will be providing integration later down the road, but as of today, we don't have that just yet.
Thank you.
And then real quick with the reliable DR portion. This is a web-based interface.
One more question before we get
Sure.
before we move forward. Sorry, but we like to do them within context, So, and we're so informal here, I can just interrupt you at will. Okay,
No
if you need to restore back some data, say 1 month ago, does cloud go that far back?
Right. So whether you're doing local backups or cloud backups, you still have the ability to set retention. And retention can be set per number of backups, days, weeks, months, or even years. So you can pick how much data gets kept before we roll it off and expire from the backups. Yes, you can dictate. If you dictate that I want to go back 12 months, then you'll have a restore point for each of the previous 12 months. And that provides you the recoverability at the virtual machine level and at the file level directly from the cloud. There's no requirement to save that data temporarily, then recover from it. Our software can read the data from the cloud directly and allow you to recover from it directly. Any other questions, Doug?
Well, here's a good comment. And don't forget the cost savings from not housing and transporting tapes, too. Very good point.
Right.
So I actually,
Right.
believe it or not, I had a job once when I was a consultant or in my engineering consulting days. They'd send you out to outsource you to different places, or you go out to this company for a week or what have you. And one of the jobs I had was each morning going to the 100-some servers, 200-some servers these guys had, and changing all the tapes. And I tell you, that was the worst job I think I've ever had. As outsourced, it was a pain in the butt. And whenever I think of cloud, I think back to that job and how easy it would be to say, "Oh, it's all up in Amazon." My job's done.
Yeah, I was fortunate. I only had one job where I had to manage tape, and
we
I was lucky, but
we all had to do it. They rotated people in and out. So sometimes you were managing. We were actually migrating. This is interesting. We were migrating from Banyan Vines to NT Enterprise on big DG clusters and Clarion fiber arrays, and this is '98, I want to say. So it was a lot of fun. But everyone had to rotate in and out. So I got stuck with a backup job from time to time, and it was not fun.
Right. Definitely can relate. Any other questions come in, Doug, on the Cloud Hub?
I think there's one at the very bottom. Let me get to it. Nope, that's it.
Okay. All right. So real quickly, I just want to touch upon here the reliable DR. Again, so just to give you a little background on PhD Virtual, we just acquired this software from an acquisition. The company was called Virtual Sharp, which provides this reliable DR product. And the real reason why we felt the acquisition was a good fit is because, for me personally, I don't know of a software today that does everything that this software is capable of. The fact that you can now test disaster recovery plans on a daily basis is unlike anything I've come across myself. And really, you'll see here in the interface how this works is, from a compliance standpoint, you focus on services. So I have Exchange, I have, domain controller. I can quickly see what's in compliance and what's not. So here's my last CRP date. Here's the last good state I can fail back to that's been actually tested and passed certification. Here's my RPO actual that I'm accomplishing. Here's my set RPO, so I can see what set and what I'm actually accomplishing. Here's my RTO actual, and then same thing, here's the set application RTO. So I quickly see what's in compliance, what's not. I can even, if I want to, export these reports. I can even have these to be received on a weekly or daily basis if I want to receive that. It's probably good for managers who would just want to see compliance-wise what's working, what's not. Maybe they want to receive a weekly report. Now, how you get to this is, you look here on the left, you can set here, what services are you trying to protect here? So Exchange would be email I'm trying to protect. And then I'm going to replicate using a number of ways. The software supports host-based replication, which is software-based, or it can also talk to SANS directly to control snapshots and the replication of data from the interface as well. Now, whichever way you get the data over there replicated, whether it's software or hardware, you can now dictate within this what tests do you want to run to certify that replication. And you'll see here some of these I've set, but just to give you an idea of what's possible. And it has different categories out of the box that you can set. So it has Exchange, it has DNS, it has AD. It gets very specific to the applications and services. So, some vendors today just verify the VM boots and that you can boot the OS and talk to VMware tools. But where that falls short is it doesn't verify the application or service, which is at the end of the day is what you need to make available to the business. This software is what goes a step further in verifying those services and applications. That's a quick highlight of the software. Also, some of the nice things about the software, it has role-based security. So if you want to delegate certain functions or certain responsibilities to certain admins, you can do so. And it's also multi-tenant. So if you're a cloud provider yourself, this is a nice option for providing access to customers themselves. They can log into it themselves, manage their own infrastructure, and not having to worry about them touching systems that they aren't responsible for or own. But again, very slick software. I think it's going to change the way people look at disaster recovery, especially for our customers, knowing the fact that they can do this now once a day, and it automates the entire process for you. So you don't necessarily have to have those scheduled DR tests. This takes care of that for you. So you don't have to come in on weekends or stay late at night to DR testing. It'll take care of all that for you. Now, just to switch back here to the slides, what's the best use case for both of these products? And when you look at the cloud hook with the backup side of things, obviously the amount of data to be recovered is a big variable in determining if this is viable or not. Like I said, we're the first people to admit that cloud hook is not a one-size-fits-all solution. If you're looking to move a certain amount of data out into the cloud, or maybe it's a good way to kind of test the benefits of cloud, you're more than welcome to try the software out. It just makes, like I said, if you want to get rid of tape, it's a nice option. Just all the headaches and costs that come with that. Going out in the cloud is a pretty nice, change of pace for you as an admin or engineer. And then two, how critical is this data? Do you want to add some maybe additional redundancy to systems that are more critical, right? So maybe you might want to have not only on-premise backups, but maybe you also want to protect those systems out in the cloud as well, right? So now you want to look at the actual the criticality or the significance of those systems. Now, the last 3 points are more specific to reliable DR and, more specifically the DR testing aspect. When you look at DR testing, do you have the available resources to invoke and perform the needed DR tests? Because let's be honest, it requires a in-depth knowledge of your application and systems to know how to recover them online. Do you have that skill set? Do you have the manpower to do that? And then, lastly is, do you have the support from the organization to do this? At the end of the day, if the organization isn't behind this, then you're going to have a hard time trying to pitch the value of what this can provide you with. And as I like to say, it gives you DR assurance, which what it comes down to is that peace of mind. Like I said, it removes the guessing game that if a disaster does occur, you know exactly what you can fall back to and what's going to come online for you. I don't think you really can put a price on that. And maybe what you kind of, how you do price this out is, what number would you place on the business and its worth? Because if you have a disaster and you lose the entire data center, that could be what you're potentially losing there, right? And businesses are being very, I find risky in the fact that they're not doing disaster recovery to the level they can now that software is available to them to be able to do this, more specifically reliable DR. So just some misconceptions about disaster recovery I want to highlight for you. And really what it comes down to is, I know where I've been, disaster recovery is just kind of like a checkbox on a list. It's kind of, you have this project plan, you might have disaster recovery, you might have other projects. And, once you have the DR site up, you have the systems running, you kind of check it off the box. And that's not disaster recovery. Disaster recovery is an ongoing process. It requires constant maintenance. And it's not something that, you get up and running, that's it. That's the biggest thing I see is, a problem, where I've been is it requires a constant, visibility. As changes are made to the production side, those changes need to be reflected in your disaster recovery plan and strategy. And again, you need the resources, money, human resources to be able to update those disaster recovery plans as you move forward into the future. And you said some people might rely too much on software to do this, and at the end of the day, it comes back, no matter what you're doing, you still have the same fundamentals when it comes to disaster recovery. You're going to set your RTOs, you're going to set your RPOs, what needs to be recovered, how fast, and how do we do it. That doesn't change whether you're using software, if it's more manual, if you're using hardware, that will not change. You want to stick to the fundamentals and then work your way from the top down. Right? So that's the biggest thing I see from people I work with and where I've been is disaster recovery is just, requires constant maintenance, just like you're constantly maintaining the production environment. DR is also the same.
Perfect, James. We have a couple more questions, comments from the audience. Are you ready for those, or we're right at the top of the hour?
Sure.
I want to make sure you finish the content before we get into these, though.
Right. This is my last slide here with kind of a predictions for the future. I'm not really. This is kind of more personal opinion. I'm not really a mind reader here, but I think you're starting to see a real big push for disaster recovery is now being brought at the executive level, and IT environments now being forced to provide proof that a disaster recovery plan is in place until it's actually going to work. Like you saw with that Gartner survey, that 40% spike in disaster recovery in the cloud will happen probably within the next year or so. It's not really a prediction; it's just kind of more where things are going today. But if anyone else has any comments to this, where they see things going, please feel free to also comment on this.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, Philip, please use the questions piece of GoToWebinar and let us know what you think is coming in the future. And on that note, it is the top of the hour, so I do want to say thank you for everyone attending this webinar, and definitely head over to phdvirtual.com for more information. You can download evals of their solution and play around with it and check it out. And if you have questions or comments, you can email sales@phdvirtual.com. There's a phone number. Phone number's up on the screen too. So a lot of good info there. Anything else to add real quick, James, before we get into the remaining Q&A questions?
Nope, I'm good for now. You can go ahead and open up for any questions.
Cool. Can you compare this to VMware SRM function/cost?
Right. So I thought this would be brought up. So let's start with SRM. So one, SRM in its name indicates its functionality. So Site Recovery Manager. SRM is a all or nothing type failover solution. So it really protects against a true disaster. I have to fail over the entire site in order to use that software. With Reliable DR, if you remember back on that one first slide, most disasters or most downtimes are due to human error. And you're not bringing down traditionally the entire data center. You might be bringing down an application or service. With Reliable DR, you can fail over just those services, not the entire infrastructure. On top of that, Reliable DR goes a step further by actually allowing you to test applications and services, where with SRM, it just verifies the virtual machine boots up for you. The other thing from a cost standpoint is SRM requires, and this may not be a problem or not, but it requires 2 vCenter servers. And the vCenter server license itself is around $5,000, so that in itself is a huge cost you got to take on if you're looking at SRM. So very high level, those are some of the quick kill points or the way we position our product against SRM.
Sounds good. Next question: Since Exchange 2010 has its own replication technology, does Microsoft certifies Exchange replication leveraging PhD instead of Microsoft's own technology?
So, good question.
That is a good question.
I can't say anyone's actually haven't asked me that before. When you look at the data protection strategies, it really comes back to the service. And for me, sometimes I'll be the first to admit, and I'll tell a customer, given what you're looking for, I don't think our software may be the best fit. And when it comes to Exchange, right, so the Exchange replication still isn't a backup strategy. That allows you to protect Exchange somewhere else. But again, if you're replicating an Exchange, corruption can be sent from production over to the other side, which would make both of those systems useless. And that's where our software comes in, giving you rollback points. So it's one of those things you want to look at and figure out at the service level, what's the best way we can protect this, and what trade-offs will we need to kind of accept if we go with this route. And maybe it requires a two-pronged strategy. Maybe you do use replication and then also use a backup product like us. which customers today do use this for. They do Exchange replication, and they do use this on the backup side of things for Exchange. So it gives you, again, redundancy at all layers to protect against certain cases of disasters that might occur.
Sounds good. I love this. One of our listeners, a gentleman named George, had a great comment. DR is like the weather. Everyone talks about it, but nobody does anything about it.
Right. It just kind of hits home with, I was hitting that, it's kind of like, it's on a list of things to do for IT, and they kind of check it off and then forget about it. And it's just, there's a lot more to that disaster recovery. It needs to be a lot more attention placed in disaster recovery. And sometimes it takes a disaster to really kind of get the attention of the proper people, which, sometimes is unfortunate, but fear sometimes breeds urgency. If you can, articulate to the proper people, how vulnerable you are in case of disaster, it might, kind of spark their eyes into really realizing how much of a need this is to really focus more on. But that's definitely a great comment, though.
Absolutely. And it's backup is one of those things. Yeah, we'll get to that, or oh yeah, we do that, but you never verify it, and then disaster happens, and the cost of your business is catastrophic. And that happens all the time. I hear about it all the time. It's actually quite sad. Let's see, what else do we have here? I would like to have an additional discussion with regard to PhD in our environment and possibly set up a proof of concept. Can someone contact me? Absolutely. If you can just send back a question with your contact info, and I'll have these guys contact you, or feel free to just email sales@phdvirtual.com, or James, any other methods?
So we will, obviously you can reach out to this way, but we will, obviously the reps will be reaching out to all of our attendees on today's presentation to discuss, obviously your opinion of the webinar, and also if solution-wise you have a desire to look at some of our products. So we will be reaching out to all the attendees.
Perfect. Can you compare can you compare what you guys do to vRanger, consolidated backups?
Right.
I haven't heard vRanger.
So vRanger is kind of I don't really, to be honest, come across them that much anymore. So I don't know how much you know about the company from vRanger. So they were originally Vision Core, then they were bought by Quest, and then now Dell owns Quest. So
does Dell still
there's been a
support
lot
that?
of transition. What was
they
that?
They have Apazure also, right?
Right. It's another thing. Dell owns Apazure. So it's, the past year or so, I've seen more customers leave vRanger looking at us than it's more being they're looking at us in vRanger. We had one customer come to us. They use our software now. They actually had something happen with vRanger that led to corruption, and their backups were actually unusable. And vRanger support came back and said, "You're kind of SOL. We can't do anything for you," which was pretty, I thought pretty ridiculous. But their backups were no good, and they couldn't recover anything. So, there's a lot of turmoil going on, and the fact that they already have Apazure, which seems to be their lead with backup. We think here that it's possible that vRanger might kind of be phased out and merged into the Apazure product, but it kind of remains to be seen, though.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. vRanger was a big deal a long time ago, but it's definitely changed over a lot of things have changed. So last thing is almost a comment. It is cloud. Cloud has downtime too, so it cannot be 100%. Well, everything has downtime. There is no such thing as 100%. Cloud is pretty darn reliable, though. In the big picture, right? The problem with cloud is when it does have downtime, it affects so many people, so many companies, and it's so Amazon goes down, that's front page news right there. If Joe Blow's widget company goes down, it doesn't even hit the last page, right? So it's just a different impact. Anything else to add there?
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of those things, maybe you don't put something that's that critical out into the cloud. Maybe it's something that you can afford if something does happen, that you can afford to have and be without for some time. Obviously, maybe things that are more critical, you keep those services on premise or local within the organization.
Absolutely. Guys, if you have any more questions, please feel free to shoot those over to me right this second, because we're going to go ahead and call this a webinar. We are done with the questions. We're done with the presentation. James, thank you so much. Anything else to add before we just call this thing, let these guys go back to work?
The only thing I would say is, if you were like me and disaster recovery is always on your mind, I would definitely take a look at our products and see if there's something we could help you with to kind of remove that concern in the guessing game.
James, I think there's support groups for that. If you if disaster recovery is truly always on your mind, buddy, I think we can help you.
Maybe we'll have our own support group as well. Maybe we might stand that up as well as a feature request or a support request.
You got it. On that note, thank you, James, so much. We've done a couple of these with you, and I've thoroughly enjoyed both of them. So if you guys are still out there listening, and I hope you are, please feel free to recommend this webinar to a friend. We did record this. It will be posted in a couple days, and we did one with James just about a month ago with a lot longer demo where James really dives into the technology of CloudHook and what they're doing. So head on over to dabcc.com and pull that one out of the PhD virtual page, and I think you guys will really like it. James is amazing. So again, thank you all for listening, and James, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And of course, don't forget, I have the email open on my screen, but definitely visit www.phdvirtual.com, and that's where you're going to find just tons of info, but you already know that. So on that note, thanks everybody.